So here's a simple idea to help you start to improvise some chromatic jazz lines. So the idea is this: we're going to think in the key of D major, but we're going to think about playing the 5 chord, so A7, and we're just going to use the notes from that D major scale. So it's like A mixolydian. Now, the idea is here, obviously we know that a major scale, or any of the major scale modes, are just a combination of whole steps and half steps, whole tones and half tones. The idea is simply that anywhere where you have a whole tone, you can just place a chromatic passing note in between the notes. So for example, let me show you. If we're going to play starting on the 3rd, so if we're A7, so the 3rd is C sharp, so we could go 3, 2, 1, which is C sharp, B, A. We could place a chromatic passing note between the C sharp and the B. So we could go C sharp, C natural, B, A. So instead of doing this, we could go, okay? And that's the idea. It's just simply placing a chromatic passing note anywhere where you have a whole step in that scale. Simple, right? But you do have to think a little bit about how you arrange the notes if you're going to make it sound like a convincing jazz line. So let me show you what I mean. The most common place that you can put a chromatic passing note in that scale is between the root note of the dominant 7th chord, which in this case is A, and the 7th, which in this case is G. So you would go A, G sharp, G. Now there's a reason why that's a good place to place the note. So just if we're thinking here about playing maybe a jazz line on a 2-5-1, we just hit the 5 chord. So we're hitting the 5 chord, the A7, we're going to hit a chord tone on beat 1. So for example, if we put the 3rd on beat 1 of the bar, which is C sharp, as we've already said, and now we come down that scale, so it's the mixolydian scale, but with that one chromatic passing note between the root and the 7th. So it'll be something like this. Now, why does that work as a jazz line? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, now the reason that works is because we're hitting a chord tone, obviously on beat 1. So 1 and 2, on beat 2 we're hitting the root note, and 3, on beat 3 we're hitting the 7th, which is another chord tone, and 4, and then on beat 4 we're hitting another chord tone, we're hitting the 5th, and then if you carry on to the next bar, and 1, it goes back onto the 3rd again, so the cycle just repeats. So on every beat, you're hitting a chord tone. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So hit a chord tone on beat 1, and it works whichever chord tone you hit. So if you played the same scale starting on the root, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. You get the same thing happens. You get the root on beat 1, you get the 7th on beat 2, you get the 5th on beat 3, you get the 3rd on beat 4. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And obviously it works as well if you hit the 5th, it works if you hit the 7th. Now what about if we were to take that idea a step further and start to add in some more chromatic passing notes? So if we were to, again, starting on that 3rd, starting on the C sharp, if we were to come down, putting a chromatic note in everywhere where we can put a chromatic note. So everywhere where there's a whole step, we're going to add a chromatic note. So we're going to go 3, 2, 1. We're going to put in a chromatic passing note between the 3 and the 2, between the 2 and the 1, and then again, as we did before, between the 1 and the 7. Now, you might say, hold on a second, that's not a jazz line, that's just a chromatic scale descending. And you'd be right, it's a chromatic scale descending, but it also works as a jazz line in this context for this reason. So if you think about it as being 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, then again you're hitting important notes on the beat. So you're hitting the 3rd on beat 1, 1 and 2, you're hitting the 2nd, which is also the 9th, on beat 2, so that's like a chord extension. So 1 and 2 and 3, you're hitting the root note on beat 3, and 4, you're hitting the 7th on beat 4. So you've got this sound coming out of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Even though that's just literally a descending chromatic line, you can still hear that A7 coming out of that. Just one more thing I would say on that though is that I wouldn't necessarily use that idea to play an entire solo. What I would do is I would use that idea to connect up other ideas. So let me give you an example. I'll try and play just a 2-5-1 line in the key of D. So we've got E minor 7, A7, D major 7. And when I hit the 5 chord, I'm going to use that idea. So I could play something like this: 1 and 2 and. Okay, so what did I do there? So on the 2 chord, on the E minor 7, I played a B minor 7 arpeggio. Now that B minor 7 arpeggio gave me the 5th, 7th, 9th and 11th of the E minor 7 chord. So it's like I'm playing on the upper extension. So this would be an E minor 7 arpeggio, and this would be a B minor 7 arpeggio played over an E minor 7 chord. Now, having done that, I then played that line that we had before on the 5 chord. Now, I landed there on the C sharp where I started, but that is the point where I suddenly hit my D major chord. So this C sharp, which was the 3rd of the A7 chord, is now the 7th, so it's still a chord tone, it's the 7th of the D major 7 chord. And on the D major 7 chord, I played a C sharp minor 7 arpeggio. I obviously like playing minor 7 arpeggios when I'm improvising jazz solos. So why play a C sharp minor 7 arpeggio on a D major 7 chord? Well, I like the sound of it. It gives me the 7th, 9th, sharp 11, so it's like a Lydian sound, 6th, and then back onto the 7th again. So yeah, I quite like the sound of that C sharp minor 7 arpeggio against the D major 7 chord. So I played that, and then I finished off the line just simply by playing the 5th and the 3rd of the D major 7 chord, but I added in a chromatic approach note before each one. So instead of going, I did. So the whole line again was 1 and 2 and. Okay, so that's just a bit of an insight into the way that I would think about using those chromatic passing notes in a jazz line.